Hey, hello everybody. I am so excited to be here today. Climate Week NYC. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of feeling like, internally, I'm like over this year, ready to create some new goals, move forward. I just hit like a moment like last week where I was like, okay, I'm energized. I'm going to do this. We're going to make 2021 the best. So I am hoping everyone else is feeling somewhat similar in some of the ideas that you've created. I think we've all pivoted drastically in this time. So hoping, and I think that's some of the things we'll talk about today with the future that is to come. That I think there's some hope around the corner. And that's, I think, what I've noticed and been seeing. Um, I am Jessica Kelly. I am the founder and CEO of Threefold. At Threefold, we help provide fashion brands with access to an ethical supply chain and training so they can grow their business for people, planet, and profit. And we're so excited to join the marketplace of the future. We love the future of fashion. We work very hard to constantly be trying to make it better and finding partners such as everyone that's on this panel today who are working within their own spaces within the industry to do that. I know none of us could do this alone. We all need each other to make that happen. So really excited to dive into the conversation. I first just want to thank our sponsors, the Starrett Lehigh building, which is in West Chelsea in Manhattan. Threefold has worked with them in the past. I cannot sing their praises more. They are the home and birthplace of the marketplace of the future. The building has replaced 8 miles of windows to conserve energy. They've offered free building-wide composting. They've installed a rooftop garden with bees and continue to be a supporter and sponsor to this day. They really are a great partner. They're a great place to work and a great place to do events with. So I love them. Pildora is a sponsor today. And we'll hear more about Pildora in just a second. A community and one-stop shop for sustainable fashion, accessories, and clean beauty, featuring over 100 impactful brands from over 25 countries. So make sure you stop on over to pildora.com and shop around. It makes it a lot easier to shop ethically and sustainably, and visit them in the Lifestyle Pavilion. And lastly, but definitely not least, Just Salad. Just Salad is the first US restaurant chain to carbon label their menu, which is awesome, making it easier than ever to make more sustainable food choices. Order today at orderjustsalad.com and visit them in the food and agricultural zone. I personally know I love Just Salad because it's hard to find good salads to be quick and on the go in New York. So I'm glad that they have an online ordering system up now and ready to go for our new world. Well, without further ado, I want to go ahead and get ready to introduce our panelists and dive into a conversation. Please note we have a chat box. So as you have questions, as we're talking, we might be talking about some really in-depth things within sustainability. If you have any questions, be putting them in that chat box throughout our conversation. We are going to have a time for Q&A at the end. And we are so excited to be able to have this conversation with you. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our panelists. First up is Camille. She is the co-founder of FabScrap. Having been a practicing designer in the fashion industry, as well as an alumna of the Fashion Institute of Technology, Camille is more than capable of relating to the perspectives and concerns designers have about industry practices, and is personally motivated to implement much needed resources and solutions. As a co-founder and creative director of FabScrap, Camille combines her design experience with waste management to lend a clear focus of why sustainability must become a key component in the education of today's designers and in shaping the future of the fashion industry. So say hello, Camille, real quick.
Hey guys, and thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Next up, we have Cristina Almeida, founder from Pildora, who I told you we would hear more about. Cristina was born in the US and grew up in Mexico before moving back to Dallas. The raw, natural beauty and landscape of Mexico instilled in her a deep appreciation for the planet and environment from a young age. She believes we are all citizens of the planet and we are all connected, as do I. It's a great sentiment. Cristina earned a degree in international studies at SMU Dallas, a degree in visual communications at FITM, and a master's degree in strategic design and management at Parsons School of Design. After recognizing the suffering of the planet's inhabitants and ecosystem, Cristina decided it was time to take a stand. By launching Pildora in February of 2018, Pildora is an online sustainable fashion marketplace based in New York City, featuring emerging brands from all over the world. I've personally been shopping around on there, and they've got some great selections, so it's definitely worth a look. Say hello, Christina.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And last but not least, Chloe Songer from Thousandfell. Chloe is the co-founder of Thousandfell. She is focused on sustainability, championing the circular economy, and ending textile waste, beginning with sneakers, which is quite the feat. Chloe's previous experience spans Vogue, Alexander Wang Group, and Gap Inc., both across Gap's retail management program and women's global merchandising. Chloe was a Princeton in Asia Fellow in Wuhan, China, and holds a BA in Economics and Chinese Language from Duke. Very impressive. Say hello, Chloe.
Hi, so excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I have worked for some of you guys for a very long time, and some of you are newer, and I just love the dedication and specificity that you bring to the space and the work that you're doing. I think it can be very overwhelming when you start learning about sustainability, just all the things that go into it that is needed to make this a better place. So I love that in the ethical and sustainable fashion community, that it's full of people who saw a problem, and rather than blame others or complain or put it to the side and forget about it, they decided to really do something about it. And I think that's my favorite thing about working within this space. So can each of you tell me, what was the moment in your life when you woke up to this problem in the fashion industry, and what made you choose the business you created to be that solution?
I can go.
Go.
So for me, I guess from an academic perspective first, I was getting my master's at Parsons, and I think that's when I started really putting faces and facts to everything that was going on. So was learning a lot about sustainability there. And then on a more personal level, I think I started going to a lot of events at one point in my life. Like I would go to music festivals, for example, and I started seeing just at the end of all these really incredible events, the last days of this event, I would see the fields would be like full of plastic, for example. So all of these amazing things would end with just such devastation of the land. So when I first started Pildora, as I told you, it was a sustainable events company. So that was sort of the inspiration there. But I kind of just woke up and was like, well, I'm seeing this waste, and why can't we create something beautiful that ends beautiful as well? And so through doing sustainable events, I ended up meeting a lot of really cool and impactful sustainable brands. And I saw that they were definitely not getting the visibility that they deserved. And so I saw that there was sort of a need to bring all of these really incredible brands together. And sort of that was the first sort of philosophy behind Pildora. And big educational experience, I guess, through meeting all of these different brands, but a lot of moments where I felt like I was just seeing things face to face and then continuing to learn about it every day.
Yeah, I likewise. That's a great story. How about you, Camille?
Yeah, happy to jump in. As you touched on, Jessica, my career before FabStrap was in design. So I was an evening wear designer specifically, and of all types of apparel, I think evening wear is the most frivolous and probably the most wasteful in that sense, because you really only wear those gowns once. And so I think for me, there was a distinct moment after a few years of already feeling a little unsettled about the waste that I was seeing after each collection. But I think for me, one very specific moment was when the creative director walked in one morning as after we had already gone into tons of sampling rolls and had already ordered several thousands of rolls of yardage, and came in one morning and just said, you know what, I'm not really feeling inspired by this anymore. Like, we're throwing all of this out and let's start from scratch. And to me, I think that was the last straw after several years of already feeling, again, a little bit troubled by what I was witnessing. And I just thought back to when I was a student and studying fashion, or even all of these entrepreneur designers, and how each one of them could utilize the fabric that was being thrown out. And already before that, I had been kind of sending interns and assistants in cabs down 7th Avenue to their classes, like trying to already, put these fabrics that were even barely used, not even just used once, like not even barely used fabrics, trying to get them to their classes and have people use them, because there was definitely a cost to it, of course, in the actual fabric, but all of the resources that went into it. And I guess a lot of my contribution to FabScrap has been based off of my experience as a designer, as a student. Basically, all the resources that I wish I had going into design is what FabScrap is able to offer, in addition to our recycling. Which, for those of you who don't know about FabScrap, we are a textile recycling nonprofit, and we work with fashion companies, but also interior and entertainment companies to recycle their waste. So thought I'd throw that in to give some context to what I'm even talking about. But yeah, I would say on a very personal level, it was just grappling with the fact that I had other skill sets besides design, and that maybe I was meant to contribute in a different way to society.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think I had a similar personal journey first before it went professional, where you just kind of were like, something's got to mean more.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common thread in this space. How about you, Chloe?
Yeah, no, I think for everyone that chooses to do something that's, in the realm of social entrepreneurship, has had a personal journey, or has had maybe not a specific moment, but a series of events or moments that have changed the way you look at status quo. For me, I don't have a specific moment, but a couple of unique experiences early in my career that helped me to found Thousand Fell and to start thinking about waste in retail and textile waste. I grew up in the Bay Area in the early aughts, and the center of the early California green energy or clean energy movement, and was fairly involved with local climate policy and climate activism, kind of through my teenage years, and then early 20s, and so had this focus on everything from solar energy to local policy, and then also national policy. And kind of walked away from it for a minute as I got into my career and I got into college and started thinking about fashion and retail. My mom was an artist and wanted to go into the art world, and was really excited to be places like Vogue in New York City, and put away kind of my climate background for a minute. But then I went and lived in China and Asia, which you mentioned, Jessica. And I started in Wuhan, but then I was working in Shanghai, and with the startup brand through Alexander Wang Group, but then also kind of seeing other startup brands and the means of production. It was, I think, foundational for me to be really close to sourcing, production, factory systems, sample rooms, really early on. And I think versus maybe starting my career at a larger fashion company here in the US, or maybe you are a little bit removed from what actual product creation looks like. I was there in and out of Fujian, Dongguan, you name it, and got to kind of see firsthand, tanneries, et cetera, and what actual, again, product creation looks like, and just how wasteful it can be. And it's shocking. It is a shocking sensory environment to be in. So wheels started turning there through that experience, ended up going back to Gap. And at Gap, I think, is when I saw the problem similar to you, Camille, on a bigger scale. Like, oh shit. And you can see what happens when, and I actually think Gap is an incredible company. And I was just, speaking so great about Gap yesterday, but you can see what happens when it's such a big team, such a big company, you're responsible to the street, and how decisions are made that would, when you're moving quickly like that will impact waste or resources. And how when you're responsive to a bottom line, you're setting material targets or cost targets 5 to 10 years out. And so it's really hard for companies of that size to be nimble with innovation and new solutions. And I think that was, in my almost 4 years there, one of the most frustrating things to me was to not see change happen rapidly enough. And so what helped me to start Thousand Fell was really that. I had this background in China where I had been able to be nimble and quick on a small team, had manufacturing relationships with my co-founder in China, was seeing new innovation coming from the material science point of view, from recycling and waste management within textile waste, and yet realized that, you know, it would probably take 10 years to get something similar launched within Gap. And so it was that need. I just felt this like urgency, like it's here. I can see it. I think I could do it. I don't think I could. I didn't feel like I could wait. And then again, drawing back on, I was also feeling this intense guilt that I had been so focused on climate policy and climate change, and yet here I was making products in Bangladesh. And so, yeah, I think not one moment, but that's how kind of Thousand Fell formed.
Yeah, that's so, gosh, I could talk about so much of that for so long. Like, I think how much it takes to change in a big brand. I think that's one of the things I almost lament, not because we don't get wonderful companies that come out of it, but I do so often speak to people in fashion in New York that get very frustrated and leave the industry because they don't see change happen fast enough. And it's sad because we need those people to keep pushing those standards forward for those bigger brands. So I always try to encourage them to stay strong and brave and be there. But I'm excited because one of the things that I'm really starting to see shift is these bigger brands are starting to take seriously some of these measures that they've just been talking about in the last 5 years. And I think COVID has forced them to, I'm calling it, I heard it coined somewhere, the Great Reset this year. And I love that. I love it. I think it's so true. I think fashion's been forced to go digital. They've been forced to renegotiate business as usual. And I think that there's a lot of promise to that. And I think that's, you know, what this event, the Marketplace of the Future, is all about, is looking to the future and taking a sneak peek into a better world that we are working to build now. So when we look into the future, we see a time past the challenges of the climate crisis, a time in which circular economies, renewable energy, and sustainable systems are the norm. It is in this spirit that the Marketplace of the Future was created, an experimental immersion into what life could really be like with this sustainability as the norm. So Chloe, I think we'll start by diving back in with you, but can you give us a look, like painting a picture of what the future of fashion looks like to you?
So at Thousand Fell, we're fully focused on ending textile waste. And I actually, the way we like to talk about it is the progression of sustainability through retail that we've seen in the past 5 to 7 years. So, you know, we've seen sustainability 1.0 being what brands like Reformation or Everlane have really championed or built, which is the beginning of supply chain transparency. So who made your product? Where did it come from? Fair trade, fair labor. And again, we haven't scratched the surface there of really digging into beginning of supply chain. There's so much more work to be done. But what's exciting is that now, you know, roughly 5 years later, and particularly even expedited this summer, you're seeing consumers trained to ask for that, look for it. They're educated. They understand that there's a problem with the retail industry. You know, we probably weekly have, and probably daily actually now, have emails asking about fair trade practices, et cetera, and which is incredible. Sustainability 2.0, which what we've seen particularly in the footwear space, has been material innovation. So that's often 1 or 2 new materials or, you know, novel materials for an end user needs. So wool, recycled polyester, sugarcane, you know, often for comfort, machine washability, versatility. And where we see the industry really heading next in the next, you know, 2 decades is end-of-life transparency and brand-owned end-of-life solutions. And we think, you know, when you look at a life cycle of a product, there's, you know, the impact that, you know, that pair of denim has on energy, water, and carbon from the beginning of supply chain, and then there's where does that go end of life. And one of the problems we have that we're not, you know, rapidly addressing fast enough in, you know, the West or the global West is we've run out of landfill space. Landfill is also a terrible solution for, you know, poor marginalized communities, what it does to the land around landfills, and leachate, which is chemical sludge or runoff, et cetera. And then we're no longer able to just ship waste to the developing world. We need solutions to handle it here at home. And so that's where we kind of, our focus is really taking material innovation and designing for end of life. And so in the next 2 decades, again, and you mentioned kind of the Great Reset, a lot of this is in line with these ideas that are starting to pop up about what is slow fashion. what is the circular economy? And there's many different kind of layers to circularity. There can be reuse, so there can be resale and thrifting, and keeping a product in use or an item in use as long as possible. That's the first step. And so I'm super, super excited by Gen Z, and driven by Gen Z. Thrifting is growing 21 times faster than fast fashion. That's awesome. How can we keep that? And how do we continue? The whole idea behind the circular economy, I'm a little ADD today, but is how do we keep value in a product as long as possible, right? And also, and then for Thousandfell, in a material. So reuse, recycle, like within an economy. Then the next step could be rental. So are you renting the ball gowns? There's a place for ball gowns like that. We all love fashion. We came here because it's emotional and so tied to culture. And you know, there will always be ball gowns, but can we rent them and then therefore have reuse and have multiple uses? And then eventually, when something like footwear or something like a shirt with stains in it, you know, it has a half-life, then how do we recycle that material and keep value in that material so it doesn't end up as waste? And so that's what I'm kind of really excited about. And we've seen so many great people jump into the space across rental, resale, and now recycling.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Yeah. I think you broke it down really well of like 2.0, 3.0, like kind of the phases that we're really going towards. Camille, how about, oh yeah.
We're still working on all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
A lot of room in material innovation, a lot of room in supply chain.
I think that's what always fascinates me too, because I'm not a scientist. So like the work they're doing in science for like textile innovation, you're just like, that does what? Like, it's just very, very cool. Camille, how about you? What do you see as the future of fashion looking like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just like got so excited because Chloe brought up so many great points, and I was like, yes, oh my gosh. But I think with FabScrap and the work that we do, we sit in this really unique position where we see kind of both the consumer and like our community point of view, but we also do see you know, the company and commercial kind of side of that as well. And so I do think it's amazing and so fantastic how so many commercial or brands and companies, like the commercial side of it, how many of them are just so supportive of the mission and what we do to keep textiles out of landfill and away from incineration. And that I think is a direct reflection on how many people, like you mentioned, Jessica, are like wanting to do better and wanting to change things at the company level. And that like, even though, you know, it is one person maybe per company that is really like championing for it, at least like they're really fighting for it. And if that means signing up with FabScrap is like the one step that they can take, at least they're taking it. So that's been really great to see that just in general, the reaction from the industry has been positive. I think in the future though, looking forward, that it would be great to see, I guess, more like the certifications become a little bit easier and a little bit more widely used. And that I think ties back to even like the consumer and like our community side of it and what they are hoping to see and like the results that they're hoping to see. A lot of people ask us all the time, like, well, who are the companies that are great to support? And, you know, like we could talk about transparency all we want, but, you know, at the end of the day, there's greenwashing as well. And so I think, you know, certifications have been that one thing that no matter what a company says, like as long as they have that, then they're actually holding up with what they're doing, at least for that particular product that's certified. So I would love to see more widely used certifications, or even have that process become a little bit easier for people to implement and to participate in. And then on the same side for consumers, for them to recognize them a little bit more, for that awareness, I think, to kind of set in a little bit more so that when something is certified, they know the meaning behind it and the integrity behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. Obviously, even in just the short time we've started this conversation, we've touched on so many areas, right, of this ethical, sustainable, you know, issue and how we move that forward. And it's a lot for a customer to understand, especially if they don't spend 80 hours a week in it. So I think that, yeah, having some more of that conversation continuing to go forward and recognition with certifications and things like that, I think you're dead on there. Christina, how about you? What do you see the future of fashion looking like?
So I love listening to you guys as well. Some awesome ideas of the future envisioned there. I agree with Chloe. I think that, and Camille as well, I think you guys both touched on really interesting points. I think the end of life is really important for the garment, and we really need to keep that in mind. I can envision definitely a future where sustainability is just the norm, and we have definitely built like regulations around that. But looking at it from, and I was thinking as you guys were talking from a market perspective, I would love to see in the future where sustainability was much more just accepted by sort of the mass of people, accepted and I guess approachable, affordable, everything just much more common. And touching on certifications, I think what would be so great is if there was just kind of common knowledge around sustainability. So everybody just kind of knew what was and what wasn't, like, and I think certification would definitely help with that. But I think even right now, I used to live in Texas. And so sometimes when I go back to Texas, some of my friends there are just like, they don't even know what sustainable fashion is. And I think some of us are still redefining that too, because it's kind of like everybody has their own definition of sustainable fashion, right? And so in the future, I imagine, we have like really defined it. We have these certifications that everybody uses, everyone trusts. Right now, it feels like all over the board because it's still so new in some ways. But yeah, so I kind of envision a future where it's just common knowledge, and it's very accepted by everyone. It's become something that is just really cool, very stylish, and it's just it's not something that's so stigmatized, really, as I know that there's a lot of places, at least in the United States, that I've been to, that it still feels like something there's still something a bit off-putting about sustainability to a lot of people. And so so I think I just envision a future where we've really gotten over that obstacle.
Yeah, I think that's great. I similarly am from the South, and so I think I all my friends and family that just are not in this space at all, and it's just not on their radar, or can't afford some of the pieces that cost a lot more money. And so I think understanding what that's going to take for everyone collectively to understand that better and be able to make better decisions because of it, and companies doing their part to do the work that makes it easier for customers. I think that's important too. Well, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but from my own experience with Threefold, I know building this future really relies heavily on partnership and finding those like-minded companies that are working in a different aspect of what your goal is, to be able to, join this fight and create this future together. How is your work building on that vision that you just shared, and who are your necessary or dream comrades to realize that vision? Christina, you want to go ahead and take that off?
I'm muting myself. Yeah, so I think, as I kind of just said, I think basically we, in order to build that future, I think we as consumers are going to obviously there's going to need to be more of a demand. So, if the demand is there, the companies will start to veer that way for sure. So I think our individual choice does really matter. And it's only really through, as you said, working together and our collective voice that things are really going to change. So our work at Pildora is really all about creating educational content. So our whole website is built about how can we deliver a message that, while making it approachable, so like while making it kind of fun, entertaining. And I think the most important thing is also to be positive in delivering this message, because especially right now, like in this year, we've had enough negative news. So I think people, they see something that feels like judgy, that feels like negative in some way, and they can be easily turned off. So I think we have to work on educating consumers and educating companies, everyone alike, in a really positive way. Because at the end of the day, it is a positive message. We are trying to create a positive impact. So I think that is how we are approaching that, how we are trying to get to that future at Pildora, is just through really educating people in a really approachable and fun way, and keeping it positive and keeping it light.
Camille, can you speak a little to that, and maybe some of the partnerships that you've created already or looking to create to move your vision forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I am glad that Christina kind of talked about education, because that is something that at FabScrap we're very, very passionate about. And again, it's both on like the, you know, the consumer side and like our community, but then also on like the brand and commercial side of it as well. So aside from like lecturing to, you know, other groups, whether it's like other nonprofits, whether it's schools and students, or just other community events, like that is something that we constantly have to continue to work on is awareness in general, like you all have mentioned. And just, I guess, because sustainability can be very confusing, and there are always so many different what seem to be like contradicting types of information as you research. It can, you know, it's hard for people to make the connection between, at least with fashion and global warming, to make the connections of like what is actually contributing, what are the actual problems, like what are the different various ways, you know, both for pre-consumer and post-consumer textile waste, how that's contributing to the issue and the climate change problem. So a lot of the community awareness that we do is really just hitting home kind of the basics and making those connections for people. And then on the brand side and the industry side, one of the things that comes with our recycling service for any brand that onboards with us is that we actually do provide kind of like a report card each year for each brand. So every brand who recycles textiles with us, we meticulously weigh and keep track of that data. And so each person has the exact amount of pounds that they recycled with us, what that means in terms of carbon offset. And we even do a calculation of like trees planted. So it's a little bit easier to digest. We also break up for them what percentage of their textile waste could be reused and was reused, and then what percentage ended up being recycled into insulation, which we call shoddy. And so we give a very detailed breakdown, which I believe is pretty unique as far as waste management services, because those brands who are pressed for time and, you know, overwhelmed with deadlines of the next collection, they are able to have someone else like categorize and keep track of all of their impact for them. And then it comes in one like very concise PDF that shows them the exact amount of what their design decisions led to. And I think that that is such a huge educational tool, and we hope a very useful tool in making better decisions as they continue to design.
That is brilliant. I didn't realize you guys did that much data reporting for the brands as well, not just for your nonprofit annual report, which I've always enjoyed, by the way. But yeah, that's a marketer's dream right there. They could be like, this is what we do. Like you're actually being able to have data instead of just this intangible
eye
in the sky.
Yeah, and for those companies that are comfortable with talking about their sustainability measures, it's again all wrapped up into one convenient PDF, and they can share or not share depending on what their comfort level is.
Absolutely. Chloe, how about you? Do you guys have any partners that really help further your vision?
Yeah, really quick to just respond to that, Camille. Awesome. So much of this, of sustainability within fashion has to happen at the design phase. Like you can't design something, so you can't have a circular product without designing into it. And then there's also just a lack, like the problem with greenwashing. I think Christina, you even mentioned it. So many people still get an icky feeling with the word sustainability, is that there's been a lack of data, a lack of easily accessible data, and then a lack of digestible. Like then once you have it, like we're working on that now. Like if you go to our website, I'd give us a C- on like publicly available data, but we're now plugging in our product LCA. But what does carbon mean? Like, do we break it into balloons or do we break it into trees planted? And it's just such an issue with how do you even communicate your efforts and how do you benchmark them? So just want to throw that out there. And then for us with partners, we have so many great partners that we're working with to achieve the vision. And just like the partners that were super necessary for us, you know, in building Thousandfell have been both factory partners, R&D partners, and then recycling partners that we've had for the past couple of years that have really helped us unlock a production process and an end-of-life supply chain process. And so when you're thinking about like, how do you get product back from a consumer? How do you break it down? How do you think about cost and reintegration of fiber? Those two partners have been super important. Dream partners though, like what does the industry need? One of the main things that I've been thinking a lot about and our team's been thinking a lot about is policy change. And so a dream partner would be like the government, right? And that's across industry, but a lot of this isn't going to happen unless there's some incentivization. That incentivization could be, as I think Christina, you mentioned, individual action and choice. And I think, yes, there's a, I think even this past couple of weeks, there's the statistic floating around that I think 100 companies cause 70% of global emissions, right? So the problem's not on the consumer, it's on these big companies and big oil, XYZ. And yes, that's true. But as a consumer and as an individual, you have a choice of which bank you work with. You have a choice of which type of automobile or transportation you use or buy. Within retail in particular, we're not going to see larger systemic change until there's consumer-driven change to back it up. A Gap can't change to organic cotton unless the Gap consumer is willing to pay $4 more. Like that's just how it is. So you do actually have a role as an individual, but then at the government level, we're lacking incentives to take accountability for waste as a brand. We're lacking brand incentives to switch to sustainable solutions. And right now, as a brand, you can actually take fabric write-offs. And Camille, you probably know a lot more about this than me, but it's much easier to get fabric write-offs for burning waste to energy than it is to donating or recycling. So that's sometimes some of the problems you'll see with brands getting into hot water for burning old inventory. And that was a big problem, I believe, earlier this year post the cancellation of spring summer collections and all the excess fabric and inventory, which if we have time, Camille, I'd love to hear kind of your role in help cleaning up what happened to the industry post COVID, but a lot there and a lot on the policy side that I think that, could really help fuel a change.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think the whole point of this conversation is there's so much more to talk about. I think you bring up some really interesting points that actually kind of leads into our last question. And by the way, anyone that's attending, now's the time to start putting those Q&As in the Q&A box. So we're going to wrap up with one last question before we move to question and answer. Now, a lot of attendees that are at these events, I've noticed, they're passionate, conscious consumers. So we're preaching to the choir with a lot of, some of the, we need to be buying better, all of these things. But there also tends to be people that are like at the point that we got to, which is, I want to do something better. I want to be a solution. But they're likely thinking of ways that they can build a company to be that solution. Where do you each see gaps in fashion where we need innovative companies creating solutions? Do we need more ethical, sustainable brands, or is there a big problem you've come across in your journey that you're just like, would someone please fix this? Chloe, let you get started because you already mentioned a little bit about policy change. Is there anything else that you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I'm like reading the question. This is such a deep conversation. I think obviously there's always room for more innovation. And do we need more ethical, sustainable brands? Absolutely. In perpetuity, every new brand who starts today, I think it's table stakes. If you start a brand today and it's kind of an outdated fast fashion or non-sustainable model, I'm not sure why you're starting that company. And there will be new designers and new talent that pop up creating new brands. But the biggest gap I see is the supply chain. Both beginning of supply chain and reverse logistics supply chain. We've had to build our own supply chain. And unfortunately, we had great support and great experience and background with my co-founder and I in supply chain and product dev. But let's say you come from the design side and you're an emerging design talent. Where do you start? And it's really hard to right now vet factory practices, vet shipping practices, vet partners. A lot of the operations side of retail is a black box. And like even big, retail partners and big name, maybe I won't name big names, but I don't believe, I don't know that all of them are digging deep enough into the partners throughout their supply chain. So Camille mentioned certifications. That's a huge area of interest, but then who's vetting and what does the certification process look like? So any innovation, again, along production, sourcing, manufacturing, be it material innovation, material design, new ways of manufacturing closer to home, ways of manufacturing less product at a time more rapidly so that we can get rid of excess inventory. There's so much that can happen on the production side, and then also in back end recycling, waste management, etc.
Yeah, I think that's all really good points. I think I similarly have experienced as we look for factories who are ethically certified for our platform is I just see it's not a perfect system, the certification system. And so there's a lot on my heart that I want to do in the future to make that better. And I'm just like kind of always keeping my eye on the horizon for people that are partnered around that space, because I think you know, certifications are only checks a couple times a year. So how do we ensure that transparency throughout the year? And what does that look like when your supply chain changes and it goes from, you know, 90% transparency to 50% transparency overnight, you know? So it's like all of those things that are going to take time. Camille, how about you? What do you see as a big problem that maybe people can start getting into to help tackle more of this space?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention manufacturing as well, but also like in a more local sense, because a lot of those issues that we are encountering could actually be made easier or maybe even solved if a lot more manufacturing was available locally. And I hear all the time of people starting brands, and like their first thought is to go overseas. And I don't know, I feel like that's a lost opportunity in so many ways. And I think just, I guess, to kind of like go into that like entrepreneurship side a little bit more as well. Like another issue or gap that I've been seeing is honestly just like a revamp or modernization of the current fashion design education. And I just taught a course last spring, and it was basically just like a sustainability 101 for fashion design. And I was shocked like how much was missing from the education. And I know that I definitely felt that I had not been given a full view of the industry and their practices when I was a student. And that was like years and years ago. And so all the more, like, I think it's a shame that like anyone who is setting out to be a fashion designer, again, not saying like you can't, not saying that creative dreams cannot be pursued, but I do think that there is a responsibility there of, if you are knowingly entering this type of profession, you should also be aware of kind of the domino effects behind your design decisions and some of those actions there, even if you are poised as a more eco-friendly brand, and let's say you are formatting your designs to be more sustainable, like there is still going to be an impact no matter what. And so I think there just needs to be a bit more focus. I would like to see a bit more focus on the design schools, and there are some really amazing design schools who are trying to revamp their curriculum, that are trying to educate the students on the current standing of the industry and what that would mean in terms of, if they were to enter, what opportunities are there to change and how kind of to step outside of that box. So I think there definitely still has to be that foundation of what is currently happening before you can start thinking about what could happen also.
I think that's an excellent point, and I completely agree. And I think we're starting to see some movement there, but yeah, I think there's so much more work to still be done. You're right. How about you, Christina? Do you have anything to expand on that?
Yeah, I think that there are definitely some gaps. I think there's a big opportunity for some innovative technologies around materials manufacturing, as you said. What I have actually seen in outreach for brands is that there's not that many sustainable shoes. Thousands fails, yeah. But I think we often come across a lot of ethical shoe brands, like vegan shoes, or some of the shoes will have like thousands of materials in it, but I feel like the sustainable technology around shoes is a little bit behind clothing. So I actually think there's a bigger opportunity if you were going to start a brand for shoes. I think that's sustainable shoes is a little bit less less saturated. I don't know. So at least that's been our experience. So I think I would love to see just like more sustainable, just completely sustainable shoes with materials made that are environmentally friendly. And I also think that there is a great opportunity to help sustainable brands market themselves. So if I think basically throughout the whole branding, really, from everything from pictures to really how do you market yourself, how to social media, everything. I think a lot of the industry is still really new, as I mentioned before. So a lot of the smaller brands really struggle with how to market themselves. And even the bigger brands, I think we're still exploring what does it really mean to be a sustainable brand and how do we market it to the greater, larger mass of people. So I think that's a great opportunity for discovery. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves in the next couple of years. But I could see that as a great opportunity and gap as well.
Yeah, I think, and that's going to picking up on our Q&A here. One of the questions someone asked, so maybe yourself or Camille or Chloe want to dive in, is how do you educate your customers directly on these issues? That's just such a can of worms. Like, how do you choose what's the most important thing to talk to them about and really pull them into this journey?
I can just continue real quick. So I forgot to mention that one of our partners that we worked with was the Conscious Fashion Campaign. So through there, we decided it's an initiative at the UN, and basically we wanted to educate our customers just through the shopping experience, which I think is a really great way to do it. It's kind of like interesting, it's fun, it's approachable. So basically when you're shopping on Pildora, you can choose from the different SDGs. So a brand, when they upload their product, will choose which sustainable development goal that they're working towards as a brand, which is a great way to educate, I think, the customer, because most people actually don't know what the SDGs are. So it's a great touch point to just educate people on SDGs. And then we have developed our own sustainability attributes, 17 of them, everything from like cruelty-free to vegan to zero waste. So a brand can also choose from which one of those apply to their product. So then when a customer is shopping, they can see the SDGs, they can see the sustainability attributes, and then they can basically, that leads them then to the sustainability page where they can kind of dive in and get a little bit more information on that. So I think you can do it on a product level, and then I think you can do it also on like more basic content, that's a little bit more fun, perhaps like a YouTube video, things like blogs, where it's a little bit less serious too, depending on the type of consumer. They might want something that's a little bit less intense.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Does anyone else quickly have something to add before we move to the next question?
Yeah, the only thing I would say that we're also working on product LCAs, putting data out there, I think helping make it tangible. The other thing, because I saw this question that we're really leaning into is community, and bringing, because I know the question was on the back end of government, what I mentioned, but how do we bring people into the mission so that we can together start to create change? And so if anybody watching is interested, we have a beta community out now. I can send you the application, but we're calling it, it's an activist program, and we're working on a couple of different like goals or missions together this next year.
Oh, got to unmute myself. That's wonderful. Yeah, I think, and I think trying, like working on what resonates with your customers, your customers will also tell you kind of how that journey plays out, and, what they understand, what they don't understand. So I think that's a good point too. I actually would love to quickly understand, why is incinerating the product or fabric, why is that bad? Is it simply because we already have it and we should be able to find a way to reuse it? The fabric can be reused. Can either of you speak to that, as far as is there an extra layer of climate issue that we should know about, and why that might be bad?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. Incinerating, which is, for those of you who are just listening, is basically just the burning of waste, and instead of throwing it into landfill, which for those of you, I'm sure you know, but landfill is basically just a hole in the ground, essentially, that holds our waste. So the problem with incineration is, of course, the carbon that gets added to the atmosphere, and then also all the numerous health issues that result from that. A lot of communities that are near incineration plants suffer from a lot of respiratory illnesses. So just as with landfills, that creates a lot of unwanted effects in communities. So the other part of this is that anything that is usable, that is being burned, like that in all ways and forms is just like truly heartbreaking, because there were so many resources that went into making that fabric. So you're talking about energy and water and, you know, just the shipping back and forth. Like when you think of I know we normally, when we think about supply chain, think of like, you know, the making of a garment, but even just the making of a fabric is its own little circle within the bigger circle. And of course, like I don't expect most consumers to really know that side of it, because that very much is like an internal industry knowledge, but there are so many steps that go into making one fabric. And so to throw away 20 yards that are perfectly usable, never even touched, that could be made and repurposed into something and have a continued life, like that is, I think, the number one goal. And so a lot of times when people ask me for, you know, like 100% cotton fabrics and like, you know, 100% natural fabrics, and that is how they can be sustainable, I also remind them, well, even if you're using dead stock fabric that is synthetic and has spandex, like that is as sustainable, if not more, because you're not using new resources to make that fabric. Like you're using something that's already just sitting there and already like available, that already use the resources. Because of course, if you were to order a brand new 100% cotton roll of fabric, that's going to use like X amount of water, X amount of resources, shipping, carbon. Like I think, again, we come back to the education part of, if someone truly understood what went into the steps of making the fabric, if somebody truly understood all those domino effects and how they contribute to the climate issues that we have, then I think their idea and definition of what could be sustainable would be a little bit more informed and overall more effective.
Yeah, no, I think that I see that a lot in the press. And so I think that gives a rounded answer of like why, you know,
Yeah.
there's other options. Is anyone working with blockchain to deal with their supply chain issue? Chloe, are you guys doing that?
We are not working with blockchain yet, but we do have a tracing and tracking technology coming out next year. So you do, in the circular economy, you would like to one-for-one track and know what your product is.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah, I know I've heard some chatter around that. It was one of our questions. And then let me go on to another one. We've got a few here. So for someone who's just starting off with the end-to-end journey, so product development all the way to delivery, these are all areas where you can execute sustainably. But as someone who is starting, one is limited due to costs and barriers to entry. So which facets can be sustainable versus the whole 360 model? Do you recommend any particular area to target first and then exponentially branch out, which is most effective? So basically, if someone that's getting started, obviously there's some things that are gonna be too expensive or your minimums are too low. What, I guess, is the best way to start sustainably and then grow as your company grows?
I think that's like one big question that every entrepreneur struggles with and tries to figure out what is the best way. I mean, I would say, again, like we all kind of mentioned this in the beginning, but there's something about the banding together and the collaboration aspect. And it's funny because within fashion, it was mostly a very like cliquish type industry where you would safeguard a lot of resources and a lot of advancements to yourself. But the one thing about sustainability that is really great is that it's opposite. And then most people want to share, they want to connect with each other. They want to share, if they found a great manufacturer, like, you know, they want that contact and to spread it. And so in terms of minimums and things like that, I feel like that is something that could be shared, and that if people were willing to network and communicate with one another, that is something that could be a problem solved. And I have seen a few brands like band together on that. I think like we've touched on this a lot is like the education and research part of it. And with that is just a reminder again of like all the different necessary steps within your supply chain. And so I think step one, honestly, is to just figure out where are the areas that you can realistically make those sustainable changes, but stick with it. And I think that for a lot of brands is where they get stuck, is because they feel like they have to do all of it and they get overwhelmed, and then they end up not doing it because they feel like they have to do all of it or nothing. And so I would say, as much as possible, like, make your detailed list of like, what is my supply chain, what are all the steps. And I'm sure Chloe also can share her experience with this, but it's more of just like also being honest and realistic with yourself on like, based on your margins and what you need financially also to run your business, like what is actually realistic and how can you make that something that you can stick to and be consistent with.
Yeah. To just build on that, I completely agree, that especially within sustainability, the industry is a lot more open. And so you have a ton of resources. I would counter a little bit, Camille, and I think for a company like Gap, they've got to take it like one brick at a time. Like we got to like remove this old thing that's been here since 1970 and put something new in. And that is a belabored process. And that's why we have goals, sustainability goals that are by 2030 this, by 2040 this. But I think, Zane, you have a great advantage because you're just starting off. And if you're just starting off across the areas you listed, product dev, manufacturing, supply chain, shipping, delivery, the options already exist. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I would recommend you don't reinvent the wheel, especially, if you're a smaller team or depending on the financing or the fundraising you have. But, it will take a little extra work and you might have to be creative about how you think about margins, pricing, and LTV to align with a more sustainable model. But there are great product development partners that you can find that are sustainable or local, as Camille mentioned. There are great manufacturing partners as well, sustainable or local. And then there are now already starting to be options for sustainable shipping partners, sustainable delivery partners. So the best thing I could do or say to do would be look at brands that you admire in the space and start digging into who their partners are. And start to just try to build and knock it out one brick at a time. But I would say anything you onboard now that isn't sustainable or isn't in the direction you want to go, it's going to be a headache in 2 to 3 years to try to shift your supply chain. Like particularly if you're I just don't know how to describe this enough because I've moved factories multiple times. If you are starting out, like try to pick a factory or a supply chain that you want to grow with for the next 3 years, because it would be a headache, I think, to start unsustainable, then get tied in and locked into a legacy supply chain and try to shift it year 5.
Yeah, and I think to expand on that, because another question I can personally answer quickly here in the interest of time is working with those certifications. So what someone asked is returning to those certifications, which ones do you use and suggest a benchmark for your practices? I know personally for Threefold, we only work with certifications that have an outside auditing body checking, not a self-assessment system. And so you can check out GOTS, G-O-T-S. You can check out WRAP, W-R-A-P, SA8000. Those are some of the 3 big ones. There's more like World Fair Trade Organization, Better Work, Fair Wear Foundation. You can really dig in. If you want to go to threefold.com, we talk a lot about that. So you can nerd out as much as you want on certifications. But that'll help you have a little bit more of those checks and balances in place, because it's a lot to do when you're getting started. And don't worry about being a solopreneur. We all get started that way typically. So you are your own team. That's very, very true. Okay, so last question. I think, Christina, this might be good for you to take. What are the considerations that need to be made when buying sustainable fashion online? Do we need more brick and mortar options in neighborhoods for people to be able to pick up their goods on foot, / public transportation? Or is there any insight on a more efficient, sustainable last mile supply chain system needed to take us to the next level?
I think it really depends on you and what your values are and what's really important to you as a shopper, as a consumer. But obviously, there are things like with e-commerce now, like carbon offsetting. So we are implementing carbon offsetting into our online marketplace as well. So I think that's definitely one of the things that people are using to help with that problem. And brick and mortar stores, I'm not so hopeful about the future of brick and mortar stores, and if that we're really in need of more of that, if that would really help solve the solution, because I think there would still be a lot in transit that needs to happen. So yeah, I mean, a short answer to that really is that I think carbon offsetting is a great way to minimize it or lower the carbon footprint of anything that is going to be shipped to you.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much. I know we've gone a little over on our time, but this was such a fantastic conversation. Christina, Camille, Chloe, thank you so much for your expertise and your time. Thank you again to Amir and the Marketplace of the Future, the Sterrett Lehigh Building, Just Salad, and Pildora for the sponsorship and making this event possible so that we can convene together and figure out a way to make the future of fashion better and sooner. Thank you all for joining. Please do check out the Instagram tags that are posted on the side here in the chat box. Every one of us is on our own Instagram account all the time working on all the things we talked about, and are happy to answer DMs and engage in comments and what you guys are working on, learning about what you guys are working on as well. I think we all are making this industry better together. And I think that's the big takeaway from all of this, is that I think, we're all in this fight and journey together. So next up will be the Future of Circular Economies panel, starting at 3:30, which is right around the corner. So do check it out. And thank you again, everyone, for joining. Hope to see you on the gram.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.